11th March 2017, when the nation was celebrating the decisive mandates of the electorate of Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand and Punjab, the nation was also mourning the loss of 12 CRPF personnel who lost their lives in a Naxal ambush in Sukma district of Chhattisgarh. After the ambush, Senior Security Advisor to the Union Home Ministry on Left-Wing Extremism and former DG CRPF K. Vijay Kumar visited the ambush site and reviewed the anti-Naxal operations. On Candid Conversation this week, we will speak to him on the effectiveness of India's counter-Naxal strategy and lessons to learn from attacks like the Sukma ambush. Welcome, Mr. Kumar, to Candid Conversation. Prima facie, what went wrong on 11th March in Sukma?
It happened when the patrols were out. And there was a lot of road construction going on in Sukma. They have done about 250 out of 500 kilometers targeted. After quite a while, this has been in the planning for about 6 to 8 years, but finally during last 1 year, the development has been very fast. It's part of the development security package which the Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh and the Home Minister here have been urging and impelling them to do. And CRP has been losing a lot of their lives and limbs in ensuring the road construction is on. One of the patrols was targeted initially by a kind of a symbolic fire from the left flank. And the other patrol was deep inside, not exactly on the road, because we don't put our men right on the road, we go deep inside, laterally to the road and watching. So it's always like a circle, you know, it's not like a linear formation, it's a circular formation. Sometimes the formations keep changing according to the needs of the terrain or the situation there. So the one which was on the right flank came into heavy fire because the platoons don't go. 3 platoons means each consisting of 20-30 people, and they don't go together. There's always a tactical distance maintained. So the first platoon which was there got into an ambush site. That ambush was not a hilly terrain, but it was a terrain with little ups and downs, some ditches and bunds. And having wrecked that, perhaps they would have wrecked that and without notice by the company there.
Okay.
So when they came under fire, including the inspector tried to retaliate, and some of them try to rush to the nearest cover, because that is usually the tactical SOP says that you take the nearest cover and try to retaliate, push them back. When they try to reach some of the trees, and the trees have already been mined, which means this place has been wrecked by some people, and they have set the mines, and it is all command mines. That is, somebody has to command and press the trigger. And when this started happening, the rest of them could not take cover because there is a hesitation. This is my conjecture, this is my reconstruction of the whole scene. I am not absolutely be 100% sure of this, but this is from my previous experience and seeing what has happened. The rest of the truth will come out in the court of inquiry. There are 2 portions of court of inquiry. One says, yes, so many people died, and they died at this place, so many people suffered injuries and so on. But part 2 of the court of inquiry, COI, part 2 will go into the details, whether it could have been avoided, whether there was an act of omission or commission, how did it happen, and so on. Have they learned the lessons from similar situations earlier?
We'll come to that.
Yeah, and when the mild explosives, it was not a very severe explosion, mild explosions suddenly erupted from behind the trees, the remaining people did not go to the trees, so they were caught in the open. Actually, this was a ploy to deny them the usual cover. And because the cover was planted with explosive. So we are in a quandary now. You can, it's very easy to say why they could not have taken precautions, because the SOP says wherever there is a cover, take cover.
Okay, we'll come to that, but before that, did our security forces become easy targets because their troop movement was predictable? I
don't want to jump the gun, let the procedural inquiries over. I went for a quick peek from, just to figure out whether there was any massive gaps in the whole thing. I don't suppose, because they used to have the patrol moving out at 7 o'clock sometimes, 8 o'clock sometimes, that day it must have been immediately after 9 o'clock. And so therefore, to say there is a pattern, which means if you want to break the pattern, you will have to do something very, very impossible. You may have to have a midnight patrol, which also they have been doing.
So you are saying SOPs were not violated,
SOPs
just that
by and large
the situation was such that they could not anticipate and the area was wrecked well enough by the Naxals?
Yes. See, the terrain always gives an advantage, not to the security force, but to the locals. Now, that was a day of village hearth. I am not holding a brief for any kind of gaps. If there are any gaps that will emerge in the inquiry, I am just trying to say, on the basis of what has happened in many other, in the theatre of LWE, how it usually happens, taking advantage of the village hearth. That is, people are going to congregate. And village hearth or the village market itself was one of the major developments in Beji, which was done mainly because of the security people's good work. That hut had completely closed 3-4 years ago, and last 1 or 2 years only it's running. That itself is
absolutely.
a plus
On those
point.
operational details, aren't our security forces expected to outwit Naxals at every stage?
It's easily said than done, because those people have better knowledge and mastery of the terrain, and they have the linguistic skills. These forces are definitely an outside force, most of them. So they have what is called the local bridge, local elements like local police, couple of them, or sometimes 3-4. So there is a limitation under which they operate. So we are better equipped, better trained, more disciplined, but their will to survive, their need to survive is little higher. So there is always this gap, because they can come in 2s and 3s and assemble very quickly, and you will not be able to make out the innocent from the armed man. They can pick up their arms, do an action, throw it away, and disappear like a normal farmer.
Which is why the complexities of their operations on the ground. But Mr. Kumar, Union Home Minister Rajnath Singh said in Parliament that 2016 saw an increase in the number of Naxals that were eliminated, more arrests, more surrenders, less violence in affected areas. Well, that is the bright side of the picture. The other reality is also that over the years, we've been hearing about how these Naxals have been laying death traps and security forces have been falling into them. And one such instance was in Sukma. Why do these things continue to happen?
The usual anticipation is that the security forces are more in number. They got UBGL, they got AGL, that is automatic grenade launchers, under-barrel grenade launchers, they got 7.62 automatic weapons, AK-47. In spite of that, why are they getting hit? This is a question which is internationally asked question, and it's an ancient question which has not been, it cannot be solved quickly by saying that you are better. The more shabbily dressed troops win often. There is an axiom, I would like to quote that. The reason being, the local being smaller in numbers, the local being a complete grip of the terrain, the local being able to disappear, and our ability not to, we should not cause collateral, too much of caution on our side. We need to be more responsible. We are not a ragtag army. Therefore, we will be seen as coming under a heavy hit whenever such incidents happen. But the fact of the matter is, last year was a very good year as far as this ratio has been concerned in terms of arrest, surrender and kill. 2016 has been extremely a good year, and the attrition ratio has been 1:3.2, which has been the highest ever as far as the moist territory is concerned. So under the one index alone, I can see that year has been very good. And if you add the other number of surrenders, etc., the turf has been shrinking from their side.
I completely recognize what you've said, and these can be seen as successes in the anti-Naxal or anti-left-wing extremist operations. But what are the missing elements in our anti-Naxal strategy?
No, the missing elements will always be there. There is no, like you say, there is no system which is perfect. There is no autocracy which is perfect, no democracy which is perfect, there is no force which is perfect. We are not superhuman beings. Though Mao Zedong called his own boys superheroes, our boys are actually superheroes, but we don't go on saying they're superheroes. But the public perception is that whenever such a hit happens, whenever an act of terrorist act happens, whenever an act of ambush happens, whenever we have heavy attrition, suddenly this perception that we are not, instead of being ineptitude or lack of competence or lack of proficiency, all these factors come uppermost. So while we are ourselves internally examining what could have been avoided or what should have been looked into, what are the gaps, to immediately brush the whole thing into an act of complete failure or a massive success on the side is not correct. Because we take away people from the ranks in 1s and 2s and 3s over a period of time. But whenever we are making an administrative movement, or whenever we are making a movement like this, an operational movement, if they are able to inflict a sufficient number of casualties, that sticks out. The Prime Minister then named it as the foremost problem of the country, internal security problem.
Absolutely.
That was right in the year 2006 or so. At that time, we started putting 20-30 battalions. Now we are more than 100 battalions.
But you are saying things have improved over the years.
Certainly.
However, since you've worked with both the UP and the NDA governments, I would want to ask from you whether you see any difference in policy from, say, 3 years ago.
You see, in substance, it has been a continuation of the policy. I have been one of the links from that government to the thread of continuity.
Which is why I asked you that question.
Yeah. So I have continued with both the governments, and I find that the will to enforce, will to implement good policies, will to bring together the two-pronged strategy of security and development. Actually, it is a four-pronged strategy. It is the security first, and the development next, and the rights third, and the information fourth. These are the basic four-pronged strategy, which has been followed earlier and which is continued and very intensified.
On this note, we'll take a break on Candid Conversation. Our guest this week is Senior Security Advisor to Union Home Ministry on left-wing extremism and former DG CRPF K. Vijay Kumar. Stay tuned.
परिंदों के ये घोंसले हमें यकीन दिलाते हैं, सच है ये, तिनका तिनका जोड़कर ही आशियाने बनाए जाते हैं। कुछ ऐसे ही बनाया हमने भी अपने इस देश को। सड़कें, स्कूल, हॉस्पिटल, सरकार के हर निर्माण में एक तिनका हमने भी लगाया है, क्योंकि हमने सही समय पर आय कर चुकाया है। अगर किसी कारणवश आपने अभी तक अपना एडवांस टैक्स जमा नहीं कराया है, तो असेसमेंट ईयर 2017-18 के लिए अपना एडवांस टैक्स 31 मार्च 2017 तक जरूर जमा करें। और हाँ, अगर अभी तक अपना इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न फाइल नहीं किया है, तो असेसमेंट ईयर 2015-16 के लिए अपना इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न 31 मार्च 2017 तक अवश्य फाइल करें, ताकि आपका अपना देश, आपका आशियाना बेहतर से और बेहतर बने। आयकर विभाग द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
क्या बात है राशिद, फर्स्ट डिवीजन में पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन करने के बाद भी तुम उदास हो?
लेकिन सर वो
सोच रहे होगे कि खर्चा कहाँ से आएगा? हाँ, चिंता मत करो, क्योंकि अब तुम्हारे साथ है मौलाना आजाद नेशनल
फेलोशिप हमारे लिए सर।
हाँ, तुम्हारे लिए और अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय के उन स्टूडेंट्स के लिए जिनकी सालाना पारिवारिक आय 2.5 लाख रुपए से कम है और जिन्होंने किसी भी सरकारी विश्वविद्यालय से जूनियर रिसर्च फेलोशिप या एमफिल के लिए आवेदन दिया।
मदद हमारी, मंजिल आपकी।
जैसे सूट टाइप, मुझे ये ग्रीन या फिर ब्राउन। ठीक है, आप ये पैक कर दीजिए। सेब कितने का दिया? बच्चे को संतरा ही पसंद है, यही दे दीजिए। अगर आप माँ बनने वाली हैं, तो HIV टेस्ट जरूर करवाएं। बच्चे को HIV से बचाने के लिए जल्द ही पता लगाना और वक्त पे दवाई दिलवाना जरूरी है।
करें वही जो बच्चे के लिए हो सही।
हर सरकारी अस्पताल के ICTC में HIV की जांच एवं सलाह मुफ्त और गोपनीय है।
सर, मोबाइल नंबर भी लिख दीजिए।
क्यों? मैंने तो आधार में भी नहीं दिया।
अरे इसी पर तो आधार से जुड़ी सेवाओं का OTP आता है।
इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न का वेरिफिकेशन भी चुटकियों में हो जाता है।
यही नहीं, MPS, ई-साइन, डिजी लॉकर जैसी सेवाएं ऑनलाइन पाने के लिए मौजूदा मोबाइल नंबर आधार से जुड़ा होना जरूरी है। मोबाइल नंबर अपडेट आधार केंद्र जाकर कर सकते हैं। मेरा आधार, मेरी पहचान।
मैं ये नहीं पूछूंगा कि आप शौच के लिए कहां गए। मैं ये भी नहीं पूछूंगा कि अगर आप खुले में शौच के लिए गए तो क्या आपने अपने बच्चे की जान को खतरे में डाला? क्या आपके गांव की बच्चियों को खुले में शौच करते हुए किसी ने बुरी नजर से देखा? आप खुद समझदार हैं, सक्षम हैं। आप ये तो जानते ही होंगे कि हमारे देश में 70,000 से ज्यादा गांवों के लोगों ने खुले में शौच की प्रथा को खत्म कर दिया है। गांव के बच्चे, महिला, पुरुष सब इस लक्ष्य में जुटे। निगरानी समितियां बनी जिन्होंने खुले में शौच कर रहे लोगों को समझाया, शौचालय बनाए, उनका इस्तेमाल करना सिखाया। क्या आपका गांव भी बनेगा खुले में शौच से मुक्त? आइए स्वच्छ भारत अभियान से जुड़िए। अब नहीं तो कब?
विदेश जाने वाले भारतीय श्रमिकों के लिए जरूरी सलाह।
परदेश में नौकरी पाने के लिए केवल विदेश मंत्रालय के साथ पंजीकृत भर्ती एजेंटों के माध्यम से ही जाएं।
फर्जी एजेंटों के जरिए न जाएं, वरना आप फंस सकते हैं।
जाते समय किसी भी व्यक्ति द्वारा दिया गया कोई भी पैकेट लेकर न जाएं, आप फंस सकते हैं।
जिस काम के लिए जा रहे हैं उसका थोड़ा प्रशिक्षण अवश्य लेकर जाएं।
परदेश में नौकरी पाओ तो सुरक्षित जाओ, प्रशिक्षित जाओ।
विदेश पहुंचते ही भारतीय दूतावास से संपर्क करें। परदेश में आपका दोस्त भारतीय दूतावास।
विदेश मंत्रालय द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
चलो गुड़गुड़म बुड़बुड़म बुलबुलों का जादू हम आ ई देखे देखे लोग अब बड़ा आ बोलो जल्दी से मुंह खोलो।
देखा? अरे ये क्या कर रहे हो?
डॉक्टर मुन्नी सही तो है, हमारा मुंह है हमारी सेहत का आईना। मुंह को स्वस्थ रखने से दांत और मसूड़ों के साथ पूरा शरीर स्वस्थ रहता है। मुंह का स्वास्थ्य बनाए रखने के लिए दिन में 2 बार ब्रश करें और खाने के बाद कुल्ला, क्योंकि स्वस्थ मुंह है सेहत का आधार। समझे?
परिंदों के ये घोंसले हमें यकीन दिलाते हैं, सच है ये, तिनका जोड़कर ही आशियाने बनाए जाते हैं। कुछ ऐसे ही बनाया हमने भी अपने इस देश को। सड़कें, स्कूल, हॉस्पिटल, सरकार के हर निर्माण में एक तिनका हमने भी लगाया है, क्योंकि हमने सही समय पर आय कर चुकाया है। अगर किसी कारणवश आपने अभी तक अपना एडवांस टैक्स जमा नहीं कराया है, तो असेसमेंट ईयर 2017-18 के लिए अपना एडवांस टैक्स 31 मार्च 2017 तक जरूर जमा करें। और हाँ, अगर अभी तक अपना इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न फाइल नहीं किया है, तो असेसमेंट ईयर 2015-16 के लिए अपना इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न 31 मार्च 2017 तक अवश्य फाइल करें, ताकि आपका अपना देश, आपका आशियाना बेहतर से और बेहतर बने। आयकर विभाग द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
हमारी खुशहाली हमारी जिम्मेदारी होती है। अब ये जिम्मेदारी निभाए कैसे? चलिए एक प्लान बनाते हैं। ध्यान ऐसा बनाते हैं जहाँ सपने सिर्फ सचते नहीं, सच हो जाते हैं। परिवार को अपना बोझ नहीं, अपनी ताकत बनाते हैं। सही उम्र पे शादी, सोच समझकर बच्चे, एक खुशहाल परिवार बनाते हैं। जिम्मेदारी निभाइए, प्लान बनाइए।
यार बहुत परेशान हूँ, नई जगह है, समझ नहीं आ रहा आधार कहाँ से बनवाऊँ।
है तो पास में ही।
अरे भाई इधर उधर मत घुमाओ, आधार बनवाना बहुत ही आसान है। इसके लिए आप आधार के टोल फ्री नंबर 1947 पर कॉल करके जानकारी पा सकते हैं, या आप इंटरनेट का इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो आधार की वेबसाइट uidai.gov.in पर जाकर नजदीकी आधार केंद्र का पता जान सकते हैं। मेरा आधार मेरी पहचान।
Welcome back. You're watching Candid Conversation. Our guest this week is Senior Security Advisor to the Union Home Ministry on left-wing extremism and former DG CRPF, K. Vijay Kumar. Mr. Kumar, before going into the break, you were talking about a 4-pronged strategy. How challenging is it to achieve a balance between security, development, rights, information, all that you mentioned before the break?
This harmonizing one with the other is not an easy thing. It's like saying that everything in war is simple, because you say that you have to defeat the enemy, simply put, but everything turns very complex in a war. Counterinsurgency is war by other means. Some people have defined it as war among the public, or war inside where the public domain is. That is a quintessential problem of separating the insurgent from the non-insurgent, because he gets mixed up. So when I say security, I would say that security is #1 strategy of this thing. The reason is there are many people who, in the innocence and with good intention of altruism or benevolence, they try to sponsor the idea. The root cause is not lack of development, so you plonk the development there, you push the trinkets, you push the goodies, you push the good schemes there. But this has failed wherever the good schemes have preceded security. Unless you created an ecology, an atmosphere, an ambience of security, you can't push things.
So security follows closely by development is what you are saying?
Yes, I should say that security should be closely followed by the development, and there should not be much gap between one, because nobody wants a security per se. Who wants security unless it's going to give them something? What security came to me? What next? What do you mean by security? They don't feel insecure. They are in their own world. They are under the grip of some of these guys. For whatever reason, innocently, some of these people, the residents, have been indoctrinated over a period of time by certain other elements. So they are completely sold. I'm talking about certain select areas where it is very, very chronically affected areas. Now, when new security goes in, and we have seen it before, without security, wherever the hospitals and schools and other things were built, in Chhattisgarh it has happened several times, in Jharkhand it has happened, they come and blow up the place, because they don't want the elements of governance. Basically, this problem in such backward areas are lack of 2-3 things. Political vacuum is there, then there is a development vacuum, then there is security vacuum. That is a fertile ground for insurgents.
So all those vacuums need to be
All
filled,
those
and that is why it's a challenge perhaps to do a balancing act. But Mr. Kumar, we often hear this debate over whether the army should be used against Naxals instead of relying on paramilitary forces who work in close coordination with the state police. Have you ever felt the need of using the army?
Army is meant for a separate task. But if army has got any tactical skills and acumen and knowledge, proficiency, that can be shared, and in fact we are sharing. We are using liberally some of the army institutions. Wherever the army has got a USP, they got a special skill, we are willing to borrow. And there are army instructors have been liberally coming to us ever since 2010, Ram Mohan Committee onwards. So that is fine. This cross pollination of ideas, cross training is all right. But to plan the army to tackle this internal problem, I think we should be very, very cautious. I am certainly not for it, and the police are capable of it. Though, whenever there is a small gap or failure, this thing will be drummed up saying that the CAPFs are not competently handled it. Probably some of us would. Those kind of things are a minority. I don't think anybody should give it a serious thought.
So you don't think that army
needs to be used? It's a very pernicious thought. It's the most dangerous thing to happen. Army is meant for a special, different task. They should be for an external security. Our people, the internal security people, have tackled Punjab, they have tackled Andhra, they have tackled Telangana, they have tackled Tripura, they have tackled West Bengal, then they have been tackling here. But because it is slow and steady, there cannot be an abrupt solution and radical change and then you bring in an agency, because it's not meant for the job, and they should do the job meant for that, and they are quite aware. The senior people in the army, they are quite aware that they should not enter this. Transfer their skills, transfer the knowledge and contribute as a partner, but never step in themselves.
Since you refer to the A.N. Ram Mohan Committee's recommendations, what is the status of implementation of those recommendations? Also, the Union Cabinet had in 2013 given its nod to raising special forces like the Greyhounds that were active in Andhra Pradesh and 4 Naxal-infested states, Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, as well as Chhattisgarh. What's the update on that front?
A.N. Ram Mohan, he was a former DGP of BSF. And he went into it very thoroughly, and he gave some recommendation. The gist of it is to improve the competency, force competency, and internally a lot of tweaking is done. If you're talking about the state forces, the capabilities, that is empowering the state police. For example, in Chhattisgarh, the force level was 33,000 few years ago. Now it is nearly 70,000. In Jharkhand, it was a similar number. They have come to 70 to 80,000. Now, when this acceleration of the local police is the most critical thing in counter-insurgency. Counter-insurgency cannot be tackled by Marines and SEALs or special forces coming from para-commandos. They are all extremely good. They are all very precious assets. They have been they have spent a lot of very valuable time and effort and energy, but they can't be put in all the areas of counter. It is basically the task of the local police. So in doing that, you are talking about Greyhounds model. Now we have got a SOG, Special Operations Group in Orissa. They are doing an extremely good job. You got the Special Action Group in West Bengal. You got the Jharkhand Jaguars in Jharkhand, and you got C-60 in Gadchiroli, that is in Maharashtra. Hawks in Madhya Pradesh. I think every state police is doing a fantastic job. STF and DRG, District Reserve Guards, which means the local boys in Chhattisgarh. Each one is become much better than what they were before. If you're trying to keep the reference point at 4 years, they are doing a fabulous job. And we have mimicked the Greyhounds. Some of them are doing equally well. So I think the force quality has considerably improved, and we are in a position to take this problem to a resolute end.
I was coming to that, but when can we expect substantive results in terms of reducing the strength of Naxals and cutting off their access to weapons and funds at the same time?
Yeah, we are trying to squeeze their access to weapons. In this unfortunate incident, they have taken some weapons. In this incident you are talking about. Absolutely. But overall, their armory and arsenal, the size has been shrinking, which is a good sign. Once upon a time in 2007, 7 to 9, if you see the number of armories looted, number of arsenals looted, number of explosives, godowns looted, it is very high. Things don't happen that way, touch wood. However, when you are talking about a deadline, I don't look at a deadline, because this control of insurgency has to be on a gradual curve. It should not be on this ups and down, because it's not a good sign. Like an ECG, going too much of up and down is very unhealthy sign. So we would
don't want
prefer,
to stick your neck out on a deadline.
I would say that every year, if you are able to improve anything between 40%, take away 10 plus or minus, around 40% to 50% improvement each year, if you start looking at, I think it will take us to a reasonable conclusion when it can be unrolled. But we can never say that, of course, I will say this problem will be unrolled in the present form at some point of time, maybe in the next 2, 3 years or 4 years. It's possible, but I don't want to fix a deadline because there are many ifs and buts in between. But our forces are all competently and very in a coordinated manner handling it.
Before we conclude, let's talk about your recently published book, Veerappan Chasing the Brigand, in which you have described in detail the chase. And share with us some anecdotes from the book that you think would make for most interesting reading. Let me tell the viewers that Mr. Kumar had actually led the STF team that finally managed to kill Veerappan in Operation Cocoon in 2004. So share with us some anecdotes, Mr. Kumar.
There are very interesting escapes, very narrow escapes. I call it close shave. Now, actually, literally, there was a close shave in which the barber or the man, the hairstylist who went in and removed the stubble of Veerappan, not only Veerappan, the entire 3-4 of his number 2, number 3, number 4. He comes out. This is right in the beginning of our hunt. And our people are not there in sufficient numbers at that point. There are only 2 greenhorns, absolutely novice, absolutely inexperienced people. So they don't know the technique of smelling or the professional smelling and looks and how checking if somebody is doing, handling pot, somebody is doing, some agriculture work. You can make out from the hand. A washerwoman's signs can be seen, but these people are not into that. They don't check smell. If they have smelt him, and if they also checked within 100 meters, they would have found his shaving kit, they would have also smelled the shaving soap, and they would have asked him, where did you come from? And they could have directly taken him to Veerappan, who has just had a close shave, literally and figuratively. This is just one of the escapes. There are several. He went to take his money from another place and he narrowly missed getting shot. And on one day, on a single day, I think that was in 1997, there is a chapter in which I was described. On the same day, the Karnataka STF has one encounter in which we miss him narrowly, and Tamil Nadu STF gets an encounter chance same evening, and there again we miss him very narrowly. Now, when you say this very narrow misses, it may look that the forces are not proficient or they are lacking in. It is not so. You will come to know when we are seeing, and also in what are the dangers which are involved. So when you go through it, many people have told me they felt like they are part of the STF. That was exactly, that was one of the things very heartening for me to understand the difficulties of a force, because it's very easy to trash a force as not having done its job. You guys have been sent in to do this, why don't you finish him within 20 years? This book, in a way, is not extenuating or explaining or giving explanation, but it does explain what all has happened over a period of time, how we could stay a little ahead of us up to a point. How we had a jungle experience which is little more smarter than ours, and how we are trying to be equal to him, how we struggled and how we progress over a period of time. So it will be like a pilgrimage, a very tough pilgrimage which finally ends on a very good note. But what all we went through, the travels we went through, the problems we went through, from the perspective of STF, from the perspective of public, what all the public went through. And Veerappan himself, I'm not looking at him as a complete demon. I have looked at him from different angles. So you may get a little bit of 360. I would not call it actual 360, but you will get a different dimensions of the man. Not only, I don't call him as a Robin Hood, nor have I painted him as a total devil. He is a mixture of, is a man of many parts, quite an interesting character.
I must tell the viewers that I read an excerpt on Hidayatullah, the criminal who the security forces managed to get infiltrated into Veerappan gang and who narrowly missed killing him once. Let's hope that more and more Jawans and officers learn from your experiences and that of your compatriots. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar, for having joined us on Candid Conversation.
I wish your viewers well. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.